The boy was only 12 years old when he walked into a world that did not want him. It was a Saturday afternoon in early spring. The trees outside were just starting to bloom, and the sun was warm enough to make people smile. But inside the grand hall of Belmont Academy, the air felt different. It felt cold. Not because of the temperature, but because of the way people looked at the boy the moment he stepped through the door. His name was Dion. He came from the east side of Detroit, from a neighborhood where broken streetlights and boarded-up windows were as common as the sound of sirens at night. His shoes were old and worn at the edges. His jacket was 2 sizes too big because his mother had bought it from a thrift store, hoping he would grow into it. His jeans had a small tear near the knee that his mother had sewn shut 3 times already, but none of that mattered to Dion. Not today. Because today he was going to play the piano. His mother, Lorraine, walked beside him. She was a quiet woman with tired eyes and hands that were rough from years of cleaning office buildings at night. She worked double shifts most days just to keep the lights on and food on the table. Life had not been easy for her, but she never complained. Not once. She just kept moving forward, one step at a time, always believing that something better was waiting for her son. She had found the flyer 3 weeks ago. It was stuck to a telephone pole outside the bus stop, flapping in the wind. The words on it said, "Annual Youth Talent Showcase. All talents welcome. Open to everyone." Lorraine had stared at that flyer for a long time. She knew her son could play. She had heard him practicing in the church basement, his fingers dancing across the keys of that old broken piano like they were made for it. She had seen the way his face changed when he played, how the weight of the world seemed to lift off his small shoulders. Music was his gift. She was sure of it. So she saved up. For 3 weeks, she skipped lunches. She walked to work instead of taking the bus. She picked up extra cleaning jobs on weekends. And finally, she had enough to pay the $50 entry fee. $50. To most people, that was nothing. But to Lorraine, it was everything. Now they were here, standing in the lobby of a place that looked like something out of a movie. The floors were made of polished marble. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. The walls were covered with portraits of important-looking people in fancy clothes. And everywhere Dion looked, there were families dressed in expensive suits and designer dresses, their children carrying violin cases and flute bags that probably cost more than his mother made in a month. Nobody smiled at them. Nobody said hello. People just stared and then quickly looked away, as if the sight of them was somehow uncomfortable. Dion felt his chest tighten. He wanted to turn around. He wanted to run back outside and forget this whole thing. But then he felt his mother's hand on his shoulder, warm and steady. "You belong here," she whispered. "Don't let anyone tell you different." He nodded and kept walking. The registration desk was near the back of the lobby. A woman sat behind it, wearing a silk blouse and pearl earrings. She had a clipboard in front of her and a tight smile on her face that did not reach her eyes. "Name?" she asked without looking up. "Dion Williams," his mother said. "We're here for the talent showcase." The woman finally looked up. Her eyes moved slowly from Lorraine to Dion, taking in their clothes, their shoes, their everything. Her smile flickered for just a second, like a light bulb about to go out. "And what will he be performing?" she asked. "Piano," Dion said quietly. The woman blinked. She exchanged a look with another staff member beside her. It was a quick glance, but Dion caught it. He knew what it meant. It meant they did not believe him. It meant they thought he was a joke. "Piano," the woman repeated slowly. "Are you sure?" Before Dion could answer, a loud voice came from behind him. "Did I hear that right? This kid wants to play piano?" Dion turned around. A tall man in an expensive gray suit was walking toward them. He had slicked back hair, a gold watch on his wrist, and a smile that was more like a sneer. Behind him stood a boy about Dion's age, also dressed in a suit, with a smug look on his face. The man's name was Vincent Caldwell. He was one of the wealthiest donors to Belmont Academy, and everyone in the room seemed to know it. People nodded at him as he passed. Staff members straightened their backs. Even the woman at the registration desk suddenly looked nervous. Vincent stopped right in front of Dion and looked him up and down like he was inspecting something unpleasant. "You want to play our Steinway Grand?" he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "That piano costs more than most houses. You even know what a Steinway is, kid?" Dion said nothing. His hands were shaking, but he kept them at his sides. Vincent laughed. It was a hard, ugly sound. "Tell you what," he said, turning to the crowd that had gathered around them. "If this boy can play anything worth hearing on that piano, I will kneel right here in front of everyone, right here on this marble floor." The crowd laughed. Some people covered their mouths and tried to hide their smiles. Others did not even bother. They laughed openly, like it was the funniest thing they had heard all year. Dion felt his face burn. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to sink into the floor and never come back. He could feel tears building behind his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these people. His mother stepped forward. Her voice was calm but firm. "My son did not come here to be laughed at. He came here to play. And that is exactly what he is going to do." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "We'll see about that," he said. Then he turned and walked away, still chuckling, his son following close behind. The registration woman cleared her throat. "You're scheduled for the last slot," she said, handing Lorraine a piece of paper. "That's in about 3 hours." 3 hours. Dion's heart sank. He knew what that meant. By the time his turn came, half the audience would already be gone. They had put him last on purpose. They wanted him to fail in front of as few people as possible, so no one would have to feel bad about it. But his mother just smiled and took the paper. "Thank you," she said politely. Then she led Dion to a row of seats near the back of the hall. They sat down together in silence. The seats were hard and uncomfortable. Around them, other families chatted and laughed, completely ignoring them. Dion stared at his hands. They were small and rough, with calluses on his fingertips from years of pressing piano keys. He thought about Mr. Eugene, his old teacher, the man who had believed in him when no one else did. He thought about all those nights in the church basement, practicing until his fingers ached. He thought about the paper piano keys he had drawn on cardboard when he could not get to the real thing. How he would sit at the kitchen table and move his fingers silently while his mother slept. He had worked so hard. Harder than anyone in this room would ever know. And now they were laughing at him. Lorraine reached over and took his hand. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Her grip said everything. It said, "I believe in you." It said, "You are not alone." It said, "Show them who you are." Dion took a deep breath and nodded. 3 hours. He could wait, and when his turn came, he would show them all. To understand what happened next, you need to know how Dion learned to play in the first place. Because it was not in some fancy music school. It was not with expensive tutors or private lessons. It happened in a place most people had forgotten even existed. 3 years before that day at Belmont Academy, Dion was just 9 years old. He was a quiet kid who kept to himself. He did not have many friends. The other boys in his neighborhood liked basketball and video games, but Dion was different. He liked to listen. He would sit on the front steps of his apartment building and close his eyes, listening to the sounds of the city. Car horns, people talking, birds singing, music playing from open windows. To him, the whole world was full of sound, and every sound told a story. One Sunday afternoon, his mother took him to church. It was a small church on the corner of a street that had seen better days. The paint was peeling off the walls. The roof leaked when it rained. But the people inside were kind, and that was enough. After the service ended, Dion wandered away while his mother talked with the other women. He walked down a narrow hallway and found a staircase leading to the basement. He was not supposed to go down there. A sign on the door said, "Staff only." But something pulled him forward. Something he could not explain. The basement was dark and dusty. Old chairs were stacked against the walls. Boxes filled with forgotten things sat in every corner. But in the middle of the room, covered by a torn white sheet, was something that made Dion stop breathing. He walked over and pulled the sheet away. It was a piano. An old upright piano, brown and scratched, with keys that were yellow from age. Some of the keys were broken. One leg was held up by a stack of old books. It looked like it had not been touched in years, but to Dion, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He sat down on the creaky bench and pressed one key. The sound was soft and slightly out of tune, but it filled the room like a whisper. He pressed another key, then another. He did not know what he was doing. He just let his fingers move, following something inside him that he did not understand. He lost track of time. Minutes passed, maybe hours. He did not know. He was lost in the sound, lost in the feeling of the keys under his fingertips. And then a voice came from behind him. "You got a nice touch, son." Dion jumped up so fast, he almost knocked over the bench. He spun around and saw an old man standing at the bottom of the stairs. The man was tall and thin, with white hair and deep lines on his face. He wore a gray janitor's uniform and held a mop in one hand. "I'm sorry," Dion said quickly. "I didn't mean to. I just found it, and the old man held up his hand. "Calm down. You ain't in trouble." He walked closer, his shoes making soft sounds on the dusty floor. He looked at the piano, then at Dion, then back at the piano. "This old thing been sitting here for 15 years, he said. "Ain't nobody played it since the church ran out of money for a music program. I keep telling them to throw it out, but they never listen. And now here you are, making it sing again." Dion did not know what to say. He just stood there, his heart pounding. The old man set his mop against the wall and sat down on a wooden crate. "What's your name, son?" "Dion. Dion," the man repeated, nodding slowly. "My name's Walter. Walter Briggs. But most folks just call me Mr. Walt." He looked at Dion with eyes that seemed to see more than most people. "You ever had lessons?" Dion shook his head. "Never? Not even once?" "No, sir." Mr. Walt was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that changed Dion's life forever. "I used to play. A long time ago. Back when the world was different, and I was young and foolish enough to believe in dreams." He held up his hands. They were rough and wrinkled, with swollen knuckles and fingers that curved slightly inward. "Arthritis took most of it from me. Can't play like I used to. But I still remember. I remember everything." He looked at Dion. "You want to learn? I mean really learn. Not just pressing keys and hoping for the best. The real thing. The way music is supposed to be." Dion felt his throat tighten. He thought about his mother, working so hard just to keep them alive. He thought about the apartment they lived in, with the broken heater and the thin walls. He thought about all the things he did not have, all the things he would probably never have. And then he thought about the sound that piano made when he pressed those keys. The way it filled the room. The way it made him feel like he was somewhere else. Somewhere better. "Yes, sir," he said. I want to learn." Mr. Walt smiled. It was a slow, tired smile, but it was real. "Then come back next Sunday, after service. And don't tell nobody. This will be our secret." And so it began. Every Sunday for the next 3 years, Dion went down to that basement. Mr. Walt was always there, waiting for him. The lessons were not easy. Mr. Walt was patient, but he was also strict. He did not believe in shortcuts. He did not believe in doing things halfway. "Music ain't just about hitting the right notes," he would say. "Any fool can learn to hit the right notes. Music is about feeling. It's about telling a story without words. It's about reaching inside yourself and pulling out something true." He taught Dion how to listen, not just to the piano, but to everything, to the rhythm of his own heartbeat, to the way silence could be just as powerful as sound, to the space between the notes where the real magic lived. They did not have sheet music at first. Dion could not afford it, and Mr. Walt said it did not matter anyway. "The greatest musicians don't read music," he said. "They hear it, they feel it, and then they play it." So he would play a melody once, slowly, and Dion would listen. Then Dion would try to play it back. At first, he made mistakes. Lots of them. But Mr. Walt never got angry. He would just shake his head and say, "Again." And Dion would try again, and again, and again, until he got it right. When Dion could not come to the church, he practiced at home. But there was no piano at home. So he did something that most people would think was crazy. He drew piano keys on a long piece of cardboard. 88 keys, just like a real piano. And he would sit at the kitchen table and move his fingers across those paper keys, hearing the music in his head. His mother watched him sometimes. She did not say anything. She just watched with tears in her eyes, wondering how her little boy had so much music inside him. 2 months before the talent showcase, Mr. Walt got sick. It happened fast. 1 week he was fine, teaching Dion a new piece, laughing at his mistakes. The next week he was in the hospital, too weak to stand. Dion visited him every day after school. He would sit beside the bed and hold the old man's hand, telling him about his day, about the music he was learning, about the dreams he had for the future. One evening, Mr. Walt looked at him with tired eyes and said, "You're ready, son? Ready for what?" Dion asked, "Ready to show the world who you are." He squeezed Dion's hand weakly. "There's a talent show coming up at that fancy school across town. I seen the flyer. I want you to go. But those people don't matter," Mr. Walt said firmly. "What matters is the music. What matters is you. Play for the ones who believe in you, and play for the ones who don't. Both of them need to hear it." 3 days later, Mr. Walt passed away in his sleep. Dion did not cry at the funeral. He wanted to, but the tears would not come. He just stood there, staring at the coffin, feeling like a part of him had been buried too. But he did not forget what Mr. Walt had told him. Play for the ones who believe, and play for the ones who don't. That was why he was here. That was why he was sitting in the back of Belmont Academy, waiting for his turn. While rich people in fancy clothes laughed at him. He was not playing for them. He was playing for Mr. Walt. 3 hours is a long time when you are waiting for something that scares you. Dion sat in the back row with his mother, watching the other performers take the stage one by one. The auditorium was beautiful. Red velvet seats stretched out in neat rows. Golden light fell from chandeliers that sparkled like diamonds. The stage was wide and polished, with heavy curtains on each side. And right in the center, standing alone like a king on a throne, was the piano. The Steinway Grand. Dion had never seen anything like it. It was massive and black, with a shine so deep you could see your reflection in it. The keys were perfect, white and black, not a single chip or scratch. It looked like something from another world, a world where people did not worry about rent or food or keeping the lights on. He stared at it and felt his stomach twist into knots. Can I really play that thing? He thought. What if I mess up? What if they laugh at me again? He closed his eyes and tried to push the thoughts away, but they kept coming back, louder and louder, like waves crashing against a shore. The first performer was a girl about his age. She had long blonde hair tied back with a silk ribbon and wore a blue dress that probably cost more than everything in Dion's closet put together. She played the violin. Her movements were sharp and precise, like a machine. Every note was perfect. Every bow stroke was exactly where it should be. The audience clapped politely when she finished. Her parents stood up and cheered like she had just won a gold medal. The second performer was a boy with glasses and a serious face. He played the cello. His piece was slow and sad, and a few people in the audience wiped their eyes when he was done. More clapping, more cheering, more proud parents hugging their children. One by one, they came and went. Violins, flutes, cellos, clarinets. A girl who sang opera in a voice so high it made Dion's ears hurt. A boy who played drums so fast his sticks were just a blur. They were all good, really good. They had been trained by the best teachers money could buy. They had practiced on instruments that cost more than cars. They had everything Dion did not have. And with every performance, his confidence sank a little lower. His mother must have noticed, because she reached over and took his hand. You okay? She whispered. He nodded, but he was not okay. Not even close. About halfway through the showcase, Vincent Caldwell's son took the stage. His name was Preston, and he walked like he owned the place. His suit was perfectly pressed. His hair was perfectly combed. His smile was perfectly fake. He sat down at the Steinway and adjusted the bench like he had done it 1,000 times before, which he probably had. Kids like him grew up with pianos in their living rooms. They had lessons every day. They went to music camps in the summer. They never had to practice on cardboard keys at a kitchen table. Preston began to play. It was Mozart, a sonata. Dion recognized it immediately because Mr. Walt had taught him the same piece 2 years ago. He listened carefully, watching Preston's fingers move across the keys. The playing was good. Technically, it was almost perfect. Every note was in the right place. Every rhythm was exactly on time. But something was missing. Something important. There was no feeling. Preston played like he was reading from a textbook, like he was solving a math problem instead of making music. The notes were there, but the soul was not. Mr. Walt had warned Dion about this. Some folks play with their fingers, he had said, but the great ones play with their hearts. You can always tell the difference. When Preston finished, the audience erupted. People stood up and clapped like they had just witnessed something incredible. Vincent Caldwell was on his feet, clapping the loudest, his face glowing with pride. Dion watched it all and felt something shift inside him. Not anger, not jealousy, something else, something quieter. These people don't know, he thought. They don't know what real music sounds like. Maybe I can show them. The hours dragged on. The auditorium slowly began to empty. Families left after their children performed, not bothering to stay for the rest. By the time the second-to-last performer finished, nearly half the seats were empty. Dion looked around at the remaining audience. Most of them looked bored. Some were checking their phones. A few were already gathering their things, ready to leave. And then the announcer's voice came through the speakers. Our final performer of the evening, Dion Williams. The words hung in the air like a question nobody wanted to answer. A few people in the audience exchanged glances. Some whispered to each other, Dion heard someone nearby mutter, "Who?" Someone else laughed quietly. His mother squeezed his hand one last time. "Go on, baby," she said. "Show them." Dion stood up. His legs felt like they were made of water. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He walked down the aisle toward the stage, feeling every eye in the room on him. The walk felt like it took forever. Each step was heavier than the last. He could hear the whispers. He could feel the doubt. These people had already decided he was a joke. They were just waiting for him to prove them right. He climbed the steps to the stage. The lights were bright and hot on his face. The Steinway sat there, waiting for him, huge and intimidating. He walked toward it slowly. His worn-out shoes made soft sounds on the wooden stage. He reached the bench and stood there for a moment, just looking at the keys. This piano was nothing like the old upright in the church basement. That one was broken and out of tune, held together by hope and duct tape. This one was perfect, flawless, worth more than his mother made in 10 years. But Mr. Walt's voice echoed in his mind. "It ain't about the piano, son. It's about what's inside you. The music don't come from the instrument. It comes from the heart." Dion sat down. The bench was smooth and cool. He placed his hands on his lap and took a deep breath. The auditorium was silent now. Not a respectful silence. Not an excited silence. It was the silence of people waiting for something to go wrong. He heard a familiar voice from somewhere in the crowd. "Vincent Caldwell. This should be interesting," the man said loudly, not even trying to hide his mockery. A few people laughed. Dion closed his eyes. He thought about his mother. All those double shifts. All those skipped meals. All those sacrifices she made, just so he could have a chance. He thought about Mr. Walt, the way the old man's eyes would light up when Dion played something beautiful. The way he would nod slowly and say, "That's it, son. That's the one." He thought about the church basement, the dusty floor, the broken piano, the hours and hours of practice, just him and the music, lost in a world where nothing else mattered. He thought about the paper keys on the cardboard, the silent practice at the kitchen table, the dreams he held on to, even when everything around him said those dreams were foolish. He opened his eyes. The keys of the Steinway gleamed under the stage lights. 88 keys, black and white. Waiting, Dion lifted his hands and placed his fingers gently on the keys. They were cool and smooth, like touching water. The room was completely still. No one was laughing now. He took one more breath. And then he began to play. The first note floated into the air, like a single drop of rain, falling into a still pond. It was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried something in it that made people stop, made them look up from their phones, made them pause mid-conversation, made them turn their heads toward the stage, suddenly curious about the boy in the worn-out shoes who sat at the grand piano. Dion did not see any of this. His eyes were closed. His fingers rested on the keys like they had always belonged there. And in his mind, he was not in the fancy auditorium anymore. He was back in the church basement with Mr. Walt, surrounded by dust and old boxes and the smell of wood polish. He began to play. The piece was Chopin. Ballade number 1 in G minor. It was one of the hardest pieces ever written for piano. Professional musicians spent years trying to master it. Some never did. It was the kind of music that demanded everything from you. Your skill, your focus, your heart, your soul. Mr. Walt had taught it to him over the course of an entire year. They had worked on it measure by measure, note by note, until Dion could play it in his sleep, until the music became part of him, like breathing. "This piece is not just notes on a page," Mr. Walt had told him once. "It's a story about struggle, about loss, about hope." about never giving up even when the world is against you. When you play it, you're not just making sounds. You're telling that story. And if you tell it right, people will feel it in their bones. Dion told the story now. The music started slow and gentle, like the beginning of a dream. The notes floated through the auditorium, soft and delicate, wrapping around the audience like a warm blanket. People who had been ready to leave sank back into their seats. People who had been whispering fell silent. Something was happening, something they had not expected. Then the music began to build. The notes came faster now, stronger, rising and falling like waves on the ocean. Dion's fingers danced across the keys with a speed and precision that seemed impossible for a boy his age. But it was not just speed. It was not just technique. There was something else. Something deeper. There was pain in the music. The pain of growing up without a father. The pain of watching his mother work herself to exhaustion just to survive. The pain of being laughed at and looked down on his whole life. But there was also hope. The hope that lived in Mr. Walt's eyes when he said, "You're ready, son." The hope that burned in his mother's heart every time she watched him practice. The hope that had kept him going even when everything seemed impossible. The music poured out of him like a river breaking through a dam. He was not thinking about his fingers anymore. He was not thinking about the notes. He was just feeling everything he had ever felt, and letting the piano speak for him. In the audience, something strange was happening. A woman in the third row, dressed in pearls and an expensive silk dress, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She did not know why she was crying. She just was. A man near the aisle, a businessman who had come only because his daughter was performing, leaned forward in his seat with his mouth slightly open. He had heard hundreds of piano performances in his life. He had never heard anything like this. A teenage girl who had been texting on her phone put the phone down and stared at the stage, completely frozen. And Lorraine, Dion's mother, sat in the back row with tears streaming down her face. She was not crying because she was sad. She was crying because she was proud. Prouder than she had ever been in her entire life. This was her son up there, her baby boy, and he was showing the world who he really was. The music climbed higher and higher, building toward something big. Dion's hands flew across the keyboard, hitting chords that thundered through the auditorium like storms. The sound was enormous, filling every corner of the room, shaking the chandeliers, vibrating in people's chests. And then, just when it seemed like the music could not get any more powerful, it suddenly became soft again, gentle, like a storm passing, and the sun coming out. The final passage was the most beautiful thing anyone in that room had ever heard. It was quiet and slow, each note hanging in the air like a prayer. It spoke of peace, of acceptance, of finding something beautiful in a world that was often cruel. Dion played the last few notes with his eyes still closed, his fingers barely touching the keys. The final chord rang out, pure and clear, and then faded into silence. He lifted his hands from the piano and let them rest in his lap. For a moment, nothing happened. The auditorium was completely still. No one moved. No one breathed. It was as if time itself had stopped. And then Dion opened his eyes. He looked out at the audience and saw something he did not expect. He saw tears. Everywhere he looked, people who were crying. Men in expensive suits. Women in designer dresses. Teenagers. Children. Even. The staff members standing along the walls. They were all staring at him like they had just witnessed something impossible. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Dion's heart pounded in his chest. Did I do something wrong? He thought. Why is no one clapping? And then, from somewhere in the middle of the auditorium, A single person stood up, then another dot, then another. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet. And then the applause came. Not polite applause. Not the kind of clapping people do when they are being nice. This was something else. This was an explosion. People were cheering, shouting, clapping so hard their hands hurt. Some were still crying, tears running down their faces as they clapped. The sound was deafening, bouncing off the walls, filling the room with a noise that seemed to shake the building itself. Dion sat at the piano, frozen, unable to move. He did not know what to do. He had never experienced anything like this in his life. In the back row, his mother had collapsed into her seat, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. The woman next to her, a stranger in a fancy dress, put an arm around her shoulders and held her like they were old friends. On the stage, Dion finally found the strength to stand. His legs were shaking. His whole body was shaking. He gave a small, awkward bow, not sure if he was doing it right. The applause got even louder. People were calling out to him. Bravo! Amazing! Incredible! Words he had never heard directed at him before. Words he never thought he would hear. He looked out at the crowd and felt something break open inside his chest. All those years of doubt. All those years of being told he was not good enough. All those years of being invisible. They were washing away, replaced by something warm and bright. He had done it. He had really done it. But as the applause continued, Dion's eyes found one person in the crowd who was not clapping. One person who stood completely still, staring at the stage with an expression that was hard to read. Vincent Caldwell. The man who had laughed at him. The man who had promised to kneel if Dion could play anything worth hearing. Their eyes met across the crowded room. And for the first time since, Dion had walked into Belmont Academy. Vincent Caldwell was not smiling. The applause went on for what felt like forever. People were still on their feet, still clapping, still wiping tears from their eyes. But Dion barely heard any of it. His attention was locked on the man standing near the middle of the auditorium. The man in the expensive gray suit. The man who had laughed at him in the lobby just 3 hours ago. Vincent Caldwell. The room began to quiet down slowly. People returned to their seats, still buzzing with energy, whispering to each other about what they had just witnessed. But the air felt different now, heavy, like everyone knew something was about to happen. Vincent did not move. He stood perfectly still, his face unreadable. His son Preston sat beside him, looking confused and uncomfortable. The boy kept glancing up at his father, waiting for him to do something. Say something. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Vincent took a step forward. The whispers stopped. Every head in the room turned to watch him. People shifted in their seats, curious, uncertain. Some remembered what he had said in the lobby, the promise he had made, the words that had seemed so funny at the time. I'll kneel right here if that boy can play anything worth hearing. Vincent walked slowly down the aisle toward the stage. His footsteps echoed in the silence. His face was pale. His jaw was tight. He looked like a man who was fighting a battle inside himself. Dion watched him approach, his heart beating fast. He did not know what to expect. Part of him wanted to run. Part of him wanted to hide. But he stayed where he was, standing next to the piano, waiting. Vincent stopped at the edge of the stage. He looked up at Dion, and for a moment their eyes met. The boy from the east side of Detroit. The wealthy man who had mocked him. Two people from completely different worlds, standing just a few feet apart. Then Vincent Caldwell did something no one expected. He lowered himself to his knees, right there, in front of everyone, on the polished floor of the auditorium. In his expensive suit that probably cost more than Dion's mother made in 3 months. He knelt down and bowed his head. A gasp rippled through the crowd. People whispered in shock. Some pulled out their phones to record what was happening. Others just stared, unable to believe what they were seeing. Vincent stayed on his knees for a long moment. When he finally looked up, there were tears in his eyes. "I was wrong," he said. His voice was rough, like the words were hard to get out. "I judged you without knowing anything about you. I laughed at you because of where you came from, what you were wearing, how you looked. I thought I knew who you were, but I didn't know anything." He paused, struggling to keep his composure. "That was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard in my life. And I am ashamed. Ashamed of how I treated you. Ashamed of the example I set for my son. Ashamed of the person I have become." The auditorium was completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Dion looked down at the man kneeling before him. He thought about all the times people had laughed at him, all the times he had been told he was not good enough, all the times he had been treated like he did not matter. He could have said something cruel. He could have made Vincent feel small, the way Vincent had tried to make him feel small. He had every right to, but that was not who Dion was. He stepped down from the stage and stood in front of Vincent. Then he reached out his hand. "Get up," he said quietly. Vincent looked at the hand, surprised. Slowly, he reached out and took it. Dion helped him to his feet. "My teacher told me something once," Dion said. "He said that music isn't about proving people wrong. It's about opening hearts." He looked at Vincent with steady eyes. "I think maybe yours just opened." For a moment, Vincent just stared at him. Then something broke in his expression. The hard lines around his mouth softened. The pride in his eyes melted away. And for the first time, he looked like a real person instead of a man hiding behind money and status. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for being better than me." He turned and walked back to his seat. The audience watched in stunned silence. When he sat down, his son Preston leaned over and said something to him. Vincent put his arm around the boy and pulled him close, holding him in a way that looked different from before, softer, more real. The rest of the evening was a blur. People rushed to congratulate Dion. Strangers shook his hand and told him he was incredible. Women hugged his mother and cried with her. Music teachers handed him business cards and talked about scholarships and opportunities. But Dion barely heard any of it. He was thinking about Mr. Walt, about the dusty basement and the broken piano, about all those Sunday afternoons spent learning not just how to play, but how to feel. "I did it," he thought. "I did what you asked me to do." What happened next was something no one could have predicted. Someone in the audience had recorded the whole thing. The performance, the standing ovation, Vincent kneeling and apologizing, Dion helping him up. Every moment, captured on a phone. By the next morning, the video was everywhere. It spread across the internet like wildfire. Millions of people watched it. News stations picked up the story. Reporters showed up at Dion's apartment building, wanting to interview him and his mother. Within a week, Dion had scholarship offers from some of the best music schools in the country: Juilliard, Berkeley, the Royal Academy in London. Names he had only ever heard in dreams. But the biggest surprise came from Vincent, Caldwell himself. 2 weeks after the showcase, Vincent came to Dion's neighborhood. Not in a limousine, not with cameras following him. Just him, in a simple jacket, knocking on the door of a small apartment. He sat with Dion and his mother at their tiny kitchen table and made them an offer. He wanted to start a music program right there in their neighborhood. A free program for kids who could not afford lessons. Kids like Dion. Kids who had talent and passion but no opportunities. And he wanted to name it after the man who had taught Dion everything. 3 months later, The Walter Briggs Music Foundation opened its doors in a renovated community center just 2 blocks from Dion's apartment. The building was simple but beautiful. Practice rooms lined the hallways. Donated instruments filled the closets. And right in the main hall, in a place of honor, hung a large framed photograph of Mr. Walt Dott, but the centerpiece of the whole building was something special. Something that made Dion's heart ache every time he saw it. The old upright piano from the church basement Dott. It had been restored completely. Every broken key fixed. Every scratch polished away. The same piano where Dion had played his first notes. The same piano where Mr. Walt had taught him that music comes from the heart. On the day of the grand opening, Dion played for the crowd that had gathered. Children from the neighborhood sat in the front row, their eyes wide with wonder. Their parents stood behind them, some crying, some smiling, all of them hoping that maybe their child could be next. When Dion finished, he looked up at the photograph of Mr. Walt hanging on the wall. The old man's eyes seemed to twinkle, just like they used to during those Sunday lessons. And somewhere, Dion knew Mr. Walt was smiling. Play for the ones who believe, and play for the ones who don single quotes T. He had done both, and the music would never stop.